Hey America, let's talk about something we love to ignore, our national debt. It's like that credit card statement we hide in the back of the sock drawer. You know, the one with the balance so big it could make a banker faint. As of today, August 28th, 2024, the U.S. national debt is eye-watering. We're talking trillions, folks, trillions with a T. It's enough to make you want to crawl under your bed and hide. But wait, before you panic, let's break this down. The national debt is the total amount of money the U.S. government owes to individuals, businesses, and other countries. Think of it like this. Your buddy borrowed a few bucks for coffee, and now the government owes everyone in Times Square a latte. It's a big number. But before you start digging an underground bunker, let's see why it's not the end of the world. All right, let's be real, debt gets a bad rap. We're conditioned to think of it as irresponsible, like that friend who borrows 20 bucks and conveniently forgets to pay you back. But here's the thing. Debt in itself isn't evil. It's a tool. Think of it like a hammer. You can use it to build a house or bash your thumb. It all depends on how you handle it. Governments use debt strategically. Need to build a bridge, invest in education, respond to a global pandemic. Debt can help make it happen. And just like with a mortgage or a business loan, responsible borrowing can be a good thing. It allows for investments that benefit everyone. But here's the catch. Just like that friend who keeps borrowing money, the government needs to be responsible about its debt.
Ah, politicians and debt, a tale as old as time. They're like that couple who fights constantly but can't seem to live without each other. Here's the deal. Politicians love to spend money. It's how they get things done, win votes, and generally keep the wheels of government turning. But they also hate raising taxes. Because, let's face it, nobody likes a tax hike. So what happens? They turn to debt like a college student to ramen noodles. It's a quick fix, a way to delay the tough decisions. The problem is this can create a dangerous cycle. Borrowing more increases the national debt, which leads to higher interest payments, which eats into the budget, which makes it even harder to reduce the debt. It's a vicious circle, folks. And to make matters worse, political gridlock often prevents any meaningful action on the debt. It's like watching a bunch of toddlers argue over a broken toy. Nobody wins.
Okay, so we know the national debt is big. But how big is too big? That's where the debt-to-GDP ratio comes in. Think of it like this. Your debt is the amount you owe on your credit cards, and your GDP, gross domestic product, is your annual salary. A high debt-to-GDP ratio is like having a mountain of credit card debt while working part-time at a petting zoo. Not ideal. A healthy debt-to-GDP ratio is crucial. It tells us if a country can handle its debt burden. Think of it as a financial stress test. Right now, the U.S. debt-to-GDP ratio is high, like really high, and it's been climbing steadily for years. This isn't necessarily a five-alarm fire, but it is a flashing warning light. It means our economy needs to grow faster than our debt, or we risk some serious financial headaches down the road.
Interest rates, the debt's worst enemy, after politicians. Remember that mountain of credit card debt we talked about?
Well, imagine the interest rates on that bad boy. Now you're starting to understand the problem with high national debt. Interest rates act like a financial gravity well. The higher they go, the more the government has to shell out in interest payments, leaving less money for, important stuff like education, infrastructure, and research. It's like trying to outrun a giant snowball rolling downhill. Eventually, it's going to catch up with you.
And here's the kicker, rising interest rates can turn a manageable debt into a full-blown crisis. It's like throwing gasoline on a bonfire. Not exactly a recipe for financial stability. So, yeah, interest rates and national debt, not exactly best friends. More like frenemies with a long history of passive-aggressive jabs and the occasional full-blown brawl. The debt's balancing act, good cop, bad cop. Okay, so we've established that the national debt is a complex issue. But is it all doom and gloom? Not necessarily.
Remember how we said debt is a tool? Well, like any tool, it can be used for good or evil. On the one hand, a high national debt can be a drag on the economy. It can lead to higher interest rates, inflation, and slower economic growth.
On the other hand, government spending, even if it's funded by debt, can stimulate the economy, create jobs, and fund essential services. Think infrastructure projects, education programs, and scientific research. So, is the national debt good or bad? The answer, my friends, is a resounding it depends. It's all about finding the right balance. passing the buck, our gift or curse, to future generations. All right, let's address the elephant in the room, the impact of our national debt on future generations. Here's the thing, when the government borrows money, it's essentially kicking the can down the road.
Future generations will be on the hook for paying back that debt plus interest. Now, this doesn't mean we're bankrupting our children and grandchildren, but it does mean we're leaving them a hefty bill. The good news is that a healthy economy can handle a reasonable amount of debt. The bad news is that if we're not careful, we could saddle future generations with a crushing burden. It's like giving them a graduation present filled with student loan bills. So yeah, we need to be mindful of the legacy we're leaving behind. After all, we only have one planet and one economy to share.
The pandemic pile on debt, and more debt. Remember the COVID-19 pandemic? Yeah, fun times. Besides being a global health crisis, it also threw a massive wrench into the national debt gears. Governments around the world, including the U.S., spent trillions to keep their economies afloat. Think stimulus checks, business loans, and expanded unemployment benefits.
Now, most economists agree that this spending was necessary to prevent a complete economic meltdown, but it also added a whole lot of dough to the national debt.
Think of it like this. You're throwing a party and everyone's having a great time. Then disaster strikes, the karaoke machine explodes, the roof catches fire, and your pet parrot starts speaking Klingon. You spare no expense to fix the situation, even if it means maxing out your credit cards. The pandemic was like that, except on a much larger scale. The spending was necessary, but it came with a hefty price tag. Can we fix this? A look at potential solutions? Okay, so the national debt is a big, complicated mess, but is there anything we can do about it? The short answer is yes, but it's not going to be easy. Remember that political gridlock we talked about? Yeah, that's a big hurdle. There are a few potential solutions, though.
One is to reduce government spending. This is like telling your friend who's always broke to maybe lay off the avocado toast for a while. It's not popular, but it can be effective. Another option is to raise taxes. This is like asking everyone to chip in a little extra to pay down the national credit card. Again, not exactly a crowd pleaser, but it could help.
Of course, the best solution is probably a combination of both reducing spending and raising revenue. Think of it like a financial diet and exercise plan for the government. But here's the hard part, getting everyone to agree on the right approach. It's like herding cats, except the cats are wearing tiny suits and arguing about fiscal policy. Living with debt, accepting the inevitable? So can we ever truly pay down the national debt? The short answer is probably not, and you know what? That might be okay. Remember, debt isn't inherently bad. It's all about managing it responsibly.
Think of it like your mortgage. You're never really going to pay it off entirely, but as long as you make your payments and your income is stable, it's not a major problem. The key is to keep the debt-to-GDP ratio in check. That means growing the economy faster than the debt. It's like outrunning that giant snowball.
So instead of panicking about eliminating the debt entirely, we should focus on managing it responsibly. It's about finding a sustainable path, not a quick fix. The final word, debt. It's complicated. All right, folks, there you have it. The U.S. national debt in a nutshell. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. The good news is it's not an insurmountable problem yet, but it does require careful attention and responsible action from our elected officials. And maybe a little less avocado toast from all of us.
The national debt is a bit like a financial elephant in the room. We can ignore it, we can complain about it, or we can try to understand it and manage it responsibly. The choice, my friends, is ours. Just don't blame me when the interest rates start to rise.